I mean, how did it all start for you in terms of the education side as well and the leadership? You've been doing it for about 17 years now, but in 2004, I think you believe you started this whole journey into education.
About teaching not lasting 5 years, and so it's funny to think, God, I'm getting close to 20, and 20 years in education is really quite strange. Makes you feel really old. But I mean, I was studying for my master's, and I think I was going to do a PhD straight away from my master's, and my sister said a music teaching job was going at her husband's school, where he was teaching chemistry. And I said, oh, fine, I'll apply. I don't really want to be a teacher at the moment. And I ended up applying and ended up getting the job. So it's really quite peculiar because I wasn't quite, but I suppose, people always say, get a job, don't keep studying. You can't be a student forever. And so I got this job in Dorset. And I remember, I handed my dissertation in for my master's. And then the day after, I was in Dorset. And I was in front of my tutor group, year 10, and there was no induction. There was no... training. Is literally, there you go, do the job. And so it's, I suppose, getting started in education like that for me, having not had that traditional training route, I'd obviously done all that music, so I felt confident about it. But it's funny, you have to start searching and researching how to do it. I became so fascinated and kind of obsessed really about how to teach and learning more about how to teach myself, because I hadn't been through that training route like most people have done, who've done a PGCE and things like that. So I had to just knuckle down and learn and collaborate and, connect with colleagues and chat to people and get to meet people who are, really, really experienced educators, because I just was so keen to learn. So I had a really good time in Dorset. I just learned so much in 5 years because it was a really, really challenging school in that the needs of students were really, really high. I think it was quite like 60% of students had additional needs. And so for a small school, it meant that you were teaching the individual. You weren't seeing groups of kids. You weren't seeing classes. You were seeing individuals. And the headmaster at the time, Martin Cook, an organist, he just knew every child. He knew every child, and he let every child be who they needed to be. So when a child left for school, they really were who they needed to be. If they needed to dress a certain way, if they needed to do a certain thing, they were just able to be themselves. So I kind of left that 5 years of working in Dorset really feeling empowered about young people as individuals. And then going to a really, really high-powered selective school, it's suddenly really different because everyone is really, really high achieving. Everyone puts their hand up when you ask a question. And suddenly it's a very different challenge. But, took with me that, see the child as an individual right way through my career, from that first school. It was really, really inspiring because, every child is different.
Of course. And do you feel like that 5 years in Dorset was the time that you kind of learnt the most in terms of how to approach teaching and just the students in general?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've learned, things have changed a lot. I mean, it's really strange to think, actually, my first job, I was never observed. No, I never had a formal observation. There was no appraisal process. Which is kind of strange, isn't it? Because now we've moved to probably a phase of education which is really, really hyper accountability. And I think I've learned, education has changed a lot. We've moved towards becoming this research-informed profession. Well, we aspire to. And we've got organisations such as the Chartered College of Teaching, which, this professional body for teaching, which is very much about creating this research-informed profession where we are, as teachers, very much tapping into that academic world, that research which can inform what we do in the classroom. And I suppose we know a lot more about how people learn, whether or not these things are right and wrong. That's another debate. But I suppose teachers probably are much more savvy about some of the science behind what they do and how they do it. So I suppose people are teaching in very different ways, whether or not it's a good or bad thing. There's probably a lot more structured teaching going on. I'm not sure that's criticism, but I think teachers, the way people are trained, and again, like I say, these are other debates probably, is the way people are being trained and the certain frameworks about what teachers should be doing and how they do it. Those things have changed over the last, 16, 17 years for me. So you've got to always keep on top of it all. You've got to keep reading, keep connected, and you just got to keep learning because, every year there's new things, there's new books to read, there's new research coming out. But I think teachers are much more savvy now. So social media has helped a lot. Teachers are much more connected because in Dorset, you know, you were driving for 7 miles to buy some eggs, you know, because you're in the middle of the countryside. But I think now educators are so much more connected, you know, through social media. So they're able to share their work, they're able to ask colleagues in different schools questions. So there's so much more informal learning going on. But when I was in Dorset, you know, I was, you know, driving around to meet people and different musicians and teachers and trying to learn. It was a very different experience. But now on your doorstep, on your laptop, on your iPhone, you can just tap in and, you know, chat to other teachers. So it's a very different culture.
It really is. And obviously you mentioned about PGC there as well. And sometimes do you feel that you can become a better teacher without going down that route? Do you feel sometimes, or does it no, or do you feel like everyone at least needs that kind of some kind of structure in their lives? Say, okay, this is the routes that you need to go down. These are safety measures and so forth.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think this is one of those big debates. Because I think, you know, stereotypically the independent sector is seen as this, you know, you do private schools, you don't have to have a PGC, you can just stroll in and become a teacher, and it must be a doddle, you can just teach. And I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, I do work with some trainees on the PGC course to music at Buckingham, and actually these programs are so important because actually it's a really, really important job. You're working with hundreds of young people, and you are shaping someone's, you know, life, intellectual life, the way they think. You know, you've got a huge responsibility as a teacher, and I suppose when you're teaching a particular subject, you form part of quite a complicated ecology of people, aren't you? There's a whole network of teachers in that school working to develop this young person, and I suppose PGCs play a really, really important point in equipping people with the knowledge, the skills, the understanding to enable to do that job well for whomever they encounter. And I guess we've all been taught, we've all been in classrooms, haven't we? We've spent most of our lives in schools, probably, as you know, as people. So I suppose you can go into a school and think, well, I know what teachers do, you know, because I've been taught, I've seen them do it. But I think in a way that there's so much hidden stuff behind that, you know, that you learn on a PGC that's really, really valuable. And whilst I think there's nearly 30 routes to get into teaching now, you know, the PGC is one way of getting into teaching. And there is a recruitment problem. Recruitment and retention is a challenge for a profession in England, well, across the world, really, because it's, as people feel like, oh, it's not paid enough, and there's, real challenge. So I think having really, really high quality training is important, and I think that should never be undervalued. And I guess even though I didn't do that initial training, I've been obsessively, doing training throughout my career. Like I did the Chartered Teacher Program back in 2018 with Chartered College. And so again, it wasn't a teacher training program, but it was very much about enhancing your expertise as a teacher. So for me, I always want to keep learning. I'm a huge advocate. I think the PGCs are really valuable, or whatever route you go into. It's really, really important to have some training to work in schools.